What is going on, Sparta Nation? Super excited to be here with you guys this morning. It is Wednesday morning at 7:30 a.m. Central Time. I know it's 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time in Indy, where a lot of you guys are, and I wanted to come to you live and just do another check-in and give you some value today to really help with some things that have been on my mind lately that I think will really help us not only going into the holiday season, but also as we go throughout this program together and just dealing with any challenges of life, whether we have this program here or not. My hope is that this serves you in a way that allows you to come alive during these times and feel fulfilled and feel like you're on the right path. And so I hope everyone's having an amazing start to the day. And let's start this talk out. I actually just did a Facebook post about this morning, but I didn't go into nearly the depth that I'm going to go into with you guys today. And so I'm curious, type yes in the chat box if you have things in your life that you would say require some strength, where to get through them, you need to summon some inner strength, whether that is, it can be business related, and it probably is business related, right? Summoning that confidence to put yourself out there, or maybe it has to do with family or something going on in your marriage or bank account or business, whatever it is. How many of you guys have something that requires strength in your life to get through it? Well, have you ever noticed that right when those situations are when they're playing out, have you ever noticed that in those moments, it's really easy to get fearful and not call on our strength? It's really easy to kind of tone down our strength instead of amplify our strength. And so I want to share a story with you. It's a personal story. It's a vulnerable story. And the purpose of this story is to illustrate this point of fear versus faith. And it's something that doesn't have to do with business, but you'll be able to relate it to business. So Janice and I, obviously we have a 3.5-month-old at home. She's an adorable little rugrat. She's sleeping right behind this wall, so I'm probably waking her up right now. And that was actually really probably stupid, putting a baby's crib right behind where I do all of my videos. So anyways, so Janice had a wonderful pregnancy, right? It was a beautiful pregnancy, and we went through the 40 weeks. She did experience morning sickness early on, but it was pretty typical, right? Pretty normal. And then we went in for, she had an induction. It was like 40 and a half weeks. She had an induction, and we went in and we found out that she was preeclamptic. And okay, so cool, preeclampsia, they can handle that, awesome. And it was something that developed literally when she was going into labor, so it wasn't something she dealt with early on. And so we noticed, okay, a little complication, not a big deal. And so we go into labor and delivery, and we go through it normal, until Janice gets to the point where she has to start pushing. And she's going all out, just everything she's got, she's leaving it on the table, and she's pushing. It's been 2.5 hours now, and the OB basically says, all right, we got to make some choices. But the baby's head was right there. But the challenge was that her nose was wedged against Janice's pubic bone, and it was shoving her nose up, and so her head was like this, and so she was on a weird angle, and so she just couldn't come out. And so after a while, Janice was totally exhausted. It had been 3 hours, and they had to do an emergency C-section. And so because Janice had been pushing for so long, and the baby's head was just kind of wedged in there, they had to do an emergency C-section, but the C-section was the most complicated C-section that this OB had seen in her entire 25-year career. And so she was in the middle of the C-section. I obviously couldn't see anything. I'm behind the blue curtain, and I couldn't see anything. And I remember just it taking a really, really long time, and I didn't know why. And I could notice some tension in the doctor's voice. And what they ended up having to do is that they couldn't pull the baby out because the baby was so wedged in there. There had to be a second OB that went back up the birth canal, pushed Lily back up, and then pulled her out. And so when this happened, from our perspective, we're like, okay, cool, whatever, get the baby out, right? But then we didn't hear Lily cry. And my heart stopped beating. And I remember sitting there going, what is going on? At the moment when they pulled Lily out, we got her out. But then I noticed the tone and intensity change in the room. And I noticed that it went from this, yay, happy, to, oh shit. And it was like this rushed, intense, like business focus. And all of a sudden, people swarmed the room. The NICU teams, the peds team, they swarmed the room. There's probably 30 people in this delivery room, right? And Janice had been kind of in this weird, hazy state for probably been an hour and 15 minutes at this point. Maybe, I don't know the exact time, but we didn't hear her cry. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, am I gonna lose my daughter? And at the same time, Janice was under anesthesia for such a long time. She had been pushing for such a long time, and she started throwing up. But she was on her back, and she was just kind of like this. But she started throwing up into her own mouth. And so now the anesthesiologist and some doctors have these suction tubes in Janice's throat, pulling the puke out of her throat. She continues to throw up, and she's cheesed out of her mind. And at the same time, I don't hear my daughter crying. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna get emotional talking about it. Like, I remember thinking, like, am I gonna lose my wife? Am I going to lose my daughter? And luckily, the doctors did a great job with Janice, and they, sorry, give me a second. The doctors did a great job with Janice, and they got her back and feeling good. Not feeling good, right? She's under anesthesia, but they settled that down, and it had been 2 minutes now. No cry. And so Janice is cheesed out of her mind. She's going, is she crying? Is she crying? And I'm just saying, not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Right? And I remember the NICU nurse or doctor, I don't even remember who it was, coming over and saying, hey, Lily's having a really hard time breathing on her own. Like, she's not breathing on her own. And so they have to use the thingy, whatever it is, I don't even know what it's called. And so they kept us posted on what that was, and 3 minutes go by, no cries. And every parent's worst nightmare. And the NICU head doctor comes over, and he says, your daughter is in shock. She's gonna be okay, but your daughter's in shock, and we need to get her up and running. And so they intervene, they keep doing it. 4 minutes go by, no cries. And my heart just is just in this pit. And I remember in that moment, something came through me. And it just felt like I was being guided. And I chose to have faith in that moment instead of fear. And I chose to believe that life is always happening for me and not to me. And I chose to believe that she was going to be okay. And I say the word choose because we all have a choice in every single moment of how we're going to respond to whatever life gives us. And then we heard those little cries. And they bring her over, they put her in my arms, and her face looks like it got hit with a truck. Like, she's got bruises all over it. Her nose has this severe bruising on it, and she's bleeding and things. And they cover it with this, whatever it is. Anyways, she just feels, she starts to cry. She's healthy. She's happy. Janice is feeling relieved. I'm feeling relieved. But I realized something in that moment. And this is where it can add value to you today. That it was a split-second decision when it went from intense fear to intense faith. It went from, oh shit, I'm going to lose my wife and daughter, to it's going to work out. It's going to be okay. It's always going to be okay. It always has been okay. It's going to work out. And it was this insane level of strength that came through me, and the sense of responsibility for my mindset in that moment that I have never felt that before. But it was like I was being guided in that moment. And I realized something then. And this is one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned in my entire life. And you can apply this to business, you can apply this to money, you can apply this to anything that you're facing. And it's that fear and faith typically show up right next to each other. Have you ever noticed that? That there are times of extreme fear and then something happens and faith shows up. It's like that. Why is that? Have you ever wondered why that is? So think of something in your life. The reason I share this story is because if you think about something in your life right now that is causing you fear, it might be seeing a family member over the holidays. It might be your business or money or whatever it is, but there might be something that's causing you fear. And I'm curious, comment below with what's causing you some fear right now. And think about that thing that's causing you fear and what it would take to switch over to faith. And I'm willing to bet that there's something really, really simple. And this is what I learned in the moment. I didn't come to learn why this was until a couple months later. But in the moment, I had switched something. And I realized the difference between fear and faith is so small. The difference between intense worry and anxiety and panic about how something is going to go and complete belief and trust, it is such a small difference. It's a 2 mm shift. A 2 mm shift. And you want to know what that 2 mm shift is? Fear. Fear is imagination undirected. And faith is imagination directed. Let me repeat that. Fear is imagination undirected, and faith is imagination directed. Both of them are focused on the unknown. Both of them are focused on what you don't know will happen. One of them focuses on what could go wrong. The other focuses on trust and what could go right. That is the only difference between insane fear and insane faith. So I see some of you guys sharing your beautiful, vulnerable stories here about your family's survival, your health, your marriage ending, these beautiful things that I know are causing some fear. Think about where the imagination goes without giving it direction. Where does the imagination go? It goes to the worst case scenario. And the reason is because our brains are survival focused. That's how our brain operates. It's trying to survive. It is nothing more than a survival mechanism, a really good survival mechanism. And at any moment in time, it's looking for what to protect you from. That's its job. And until we reframe that, which we're going to work on in detail, in total detail throughout this program, your brain will automatically be wired to focus on what could go wrong because it's trying to survive and it's trying to gain a sense of certainty and it's trying to gain a sense of comfort. But I don't know if you realize this, but trying to control your life doesn't really work. You're never really in control of anything, right? So we can say focus on what we can control, and that's really great advice, and I do recommend that you do that. But at the end of the day, we're not really in control of how things go. We're only in control of how we feel and how we act. That's all we're really in control of. So if we take a second and just say to ourselves, what could go right? If I looked at this differently, how could I choose to have faith that it's going to be okay and suspend reality for just a couple of moments and say, you know what? It could go okay because of this. Give your imagination some direction to focus on a more compelling future instead of a vicious ending. When you do that and you focus on a more compelling future instead of making things worse, then what happens is all of a sudden, you start getting new insights into how to fix things. Let's use the example of a marriage. If a marriage is going south, and we're living in fear of a marriage ending, how does that cause us to show up? Tense, timid, held back, constricted, withholding love based on the other person's actions. They need to show me love before I really open up to them, right? And what are the consequences of that? It causes the other person to react more negatively. And so they are tense and timid. And it's like if you're pushing against something that's pushing against you and you go nowhere, right? And it makes you feel stuck. But when you choose faith and you give yourself a beautiful vision of the future, you direct your imagination, then all of a sudden in that moment, you realize it's going to be okay. I'm going to choose to believe that it's going to be okay. And I'm going to choose to trust that it's going to work out. And when you choose to trust that it's going to work out, let's use the example of a marriage. How do you show up differently? You're more relaxed, you're more open, you're more loving and giving and caring regardless of what the other person does. And when you don't have an expectation on how they act, you don't withhold love until they show you love. You give love because it feels good to give. And then you start treating them the same way you did in the beginning. And when you treat your partner the same way you did in the beginning, there will never be an end. Let me repeat that for all you guys that said marriage challenges. When you treat your partner the same way you did in the beginning, there will never be an end. And the reason for that is because in the beginning, you're marketing yourself. You are a marketer in the beginning. And how do you market? You give and you give and you give and you give and you give without any expectation of something in return. When they ask you to take out the trash, you skip, you jump and say, I will gladly. That's what ends up happening. We look like we judge people for the same things that we used to be so excited about. And then it ends up losing polarity and excitement in the marriage. But if you treat them the same way you did in the beginning without any conditions or expectations, I'm going off on a tangent here, and we're going to do plenty of stuff on marriage, don't worry. But when we do that and we refocus, all of a sudden, and we give faith, bring faith to the outcome instead of fear, we show up differently. And when you show up differently, people have to respond differently. And it's a beautiful way of living. Change in a relationship starts with one person, not two. It starts with one. One person can change everything. One person can change all of it. And it starts with your mindset and your state, how you show up. So the whole purpose of this story with Lily and with Janice is I learned a couple things in that moment. I learned that number one, God's delays are not God's denials unless I give up. Let me repeat that. God's delays are not God's denials unless I give up. Or for those of you guys that believe in the universe instead of that, whatever you believe in is wonderful. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. You might believe that the universe's delays are not the universe's denials unless you give up. I also learned that when you trust in something greater than yourself and you have this belief in something greater than yourself, all of a sudden you can thrive and you can choose faith. You can direct your imagination and believe that it's going to work out the way that it's meant to work out. There's a belief that I have that has guided me to this day and it's changed my life. And this belief is really, really quite simple. Life is always happening for me and not to me. Let me repeat that. Life is always happening for you and not to you. When we view life happening to us, when that happens, all of a sudden we're the victim, we're not responsible, and we hold back. But when we believe life is happening for us, we show up differently. We show up with this reverence for life, with this gratitude, with this passion. When you show up with gratitude for life happening for you and not to you, it's impossible to feel pain. Because please write this down. It is truly impossible to feel pain if you are deeply grateful. You cannot feel worry or fear and gratitude simultaneously. You cannot feel depression and appreciation simultaneously. It is literally impossible. It's like trying to be sad and jumping up and down in the mirror naked. You can't do both at the same time, right? It just doesn't work. So that's what we want to do. When you have faith that it's going to be okay and that life is happening for you and not to you, you show up differently. And you can use this in your business. You can use this in your marriage. You can use this in your finances. You can use this in your relationship with your kids. Everything changes. But in that moment, I just felt this. All of a sudden, I decided to say, no, I'm going to choose to believe that life is going to work out. That life is happening for me and not to me. And I felt a sense of calm. And isn't it funny how the more you appreciate about your current circumstances, the more you tend to be able to change your current circumstances? But when you deny your current circumstances and reject them, then all of a sudden they get worse. You ever realize that? The more you tend to appreciate about how life already is, that's when you tend to get what you want. But when you reject it and you say, no, this shouldn't happen, this should not, you're living in the world of shoulds, then all of a sudden life keeps teaching you lessons. And I believe that life teaches you lessons in three ways. I call them feathers, bricks, and trucks. Life sometimes dusts you with a little feather. It says, hey, you should probably pay attention to this area, right? And let's use the example of, let's scroll up here and see what's an example so I can give you guys some, right? Okay, so we'll use family survival, right? My family's survival. Or we'll use, let's use business because this is a business group. Let's use business, right? You ever notice that sometimes life dusts you with a little feather and gives you a little intuition that says, hey, you should probably pay attention to that. Hey, you should probably change your perspective on that. But because we're so proud and we believe we know how life should be and we want to be in control and we want to feel certain, we're like, right? And we brush it off. And so this might be you realizing that, oh, I need to do a little bit more marketing, or I need to give a little bit more free value, or I need to put myself out there a little bit more. And whatever it is, like you can use this for anything, but you guys all have had those moments where you get a little bit of intuition that you should probably change something, but you don't listen. And then the big guy or the universe or whatever you believe in goes, dude, I'm giving you a lesson here. Like, why aren't you paying attention? And so what then happens is life throws a brick through your window with a little note wrapped around it, and that note says, hey, dummy, pay attention. Right? That's what happens. And because we're so upset that life threw a brick through our window, we're not even looking at the note that's on the brick. We're just saying, no, it shouldn't have happened that way. Life shouldn't have thrown a brick through my window. This isn't fair. Why is life always happening to me? People aren't fair. People aren't joining me. This isn't cool that life threw a brick through my window. Now I got to go and buy a new window. That's going to cost me X hundred of dollars. Have someone come out here and reinstall it. When the lesson that life is trying to teach you is sitting right there in your living room. You're just not opening your eyes because you're too pissed off about the conditions that you're not looking at the lesson. You can use this for whatever. I know I'm not really going into business here, but you can use it for anything. So now the big guy's going, what the hell, right? Why aren't you listening to me? Why aren't you listening? And then life hits you in the face with a truck. You guys ever had those moments where life just comes up, and if life is a truck, it's whack right in the face, and it hurts, and it forces you to pay attention. But here's what a lot of people do. They refuse to pay attention because they're in so much pain. They realize, I probably should pay attention, but they're too proud, and they're saying life should be different and I shouldn't hurt this much. And they deny where they currently are. And when you deny where you currently are, you miss the gift that's right in front of you. It hit you in the face with a baseball bat. Anything that's causing pain in your life right now is beautiful. That might hurt to hear. Anything that's causing you pain in your life right now is beautiful. If that is a person, write this down. All people are spiritual assignments. That's a Gabby Bernstein quote. All people are spiritual assignments. They're meant to teach you something. And when we go through life thinking that our way is the only way, we're missing the lesson right in front of us. So if a marriage, let's use the example of a marriage, it might dust you with a feather saying, hey, pay attention to this. And it's that little resistance, that little resentment that starts to show up a couple years in the marriage, right? But we don't pay attention. Then life throws a brick through your window. And this might be that your spouse is more reserved or spending more time at work or just not as involved with you as they used to be. And you build up even more resentment. The lesson's right there, right in front of you. Right in front of you. But you're not paying attention because it's not fair that this is how things are going. And then life hits you with a truck, an affair, or an addiction, or a divorce, right? Hits you with a truck. Pay attention to this lesson. Now, I'm not saying that the relationship is the right one, right? It might not be. Cool. But my point is that all people are spiritual assignments, and whatever pain you're facing in your life right now, it's a gift. It's leading you somewhere, and it's teaching you a lesson, whether in the form of feathers, bricks, or trucks. But until you open your eyes to see the lesson, the pain's just going to get worse, and eventually it's going to get numb, and then you're going to think that's how life is, and then you're going to settle. That's not you. That's not why you're here. That's not why you're trying to grow this much. I don't believe you'll get to that point. Maybe there's a part of your life where you've gotten to that point, but my advice there is pay attention. Pay attention and have faith. When you have faith that you're always being guided, all of a sudden comes back around and you show up differently, and then people have to respond differently. So that's fear versus faith. There are two wolves that live inside of you, fear and faith. The one that becomes the alpha is the one that you feed. Let me repeat that. There are two wolves that are living inside of you, fear and faith, devil and angel. Negativity, positivity, but mostly fear versus faith. And the wolf that becomes the alpha, the one that takes over your life, the one that drives your life to where your ultimate destination or destiny is the one that you feed. So which wolf are you feeding right now? The one that's going to rip your heart to shreds and make you feel pain, or the one that's going to make you come alive and give and be nurturing and caring and grow? Which one are you going to feed? And that's the one, whatever you decide, will will determine the path you go, which will lead to an ultimate destination or destiny, if that makes sense. So you can use this for the holidays. You can use this for the people in your life that cause you stress. Chances are there are people in this group that are watching this video that have people that are going to cause them some stress over the holidays. Well, when you show up with a sense of faith and seeing the innocence in people instead of judging them and thinking they should be the way you want them to be, please write this down. All people are correct in their own mind. All people are correct in their own mind. And so we all go through life with our particular lens, right? This is how we view life. And we think other people should conform to our way of thinking. And when we live that way, then what we're really saying is, I judge everyone that's not like me. And when you judge everyone that's not like you, aka someone around the holidays that's giving you a hard time, then all of a sudden, you feel less than. Because you judge someone, you show up less than the best version of yourself. They respond to judgment, because judgment is basically saying, I would love you if. That's what judgment is. I would love you if, right? And if someone feels I would love you if, do you feel loved? No, you feel rejected. And so we go into the holiday season, if family causes us pain, we go into the holiday season thinking that other people should be like us. But really, we're just judging them and we're causing them to react in a negative way. When if we were to come in with faith and seeing the innocence in those people and seeing the beauty in their soul of who they really are and realizing they're just doing the best they can with what they have, and we choose to have compassion for them, then all of a sudden we can have an amazing holiday. What if you were the example of love this holiday season instead of expecting people to show you love in the way that you want it this holiday season? How would they change their response to you? I had this example with my mom the other day, right? My mom is in let's just say she's consistently has the habit of going into lower states. And we'll talk more about that on your program. But I showed up with love and seeing the innocence in her. And it was like the stock market. She would spike up with more happiness, but she'd go back down. But then she'd spike up again and go back down. But we got to the point where her lows were higher than her old highs were, just from me showing up with love and seeing the innocence in her. And so in my own mind, I go, you beautiful monster, I love you, right? Instead of saying, screw you, you should be different. It changes everything. I don't say that she's a beautiful monster, but I say it in my own head, it interrupts my pattern. Use that for the holidays. And allow yourself to see these holidays as a time of loving, as a time of giving. And when you do, you're going to show up different in the new year. When you have faith that things are going to work out, don't you allow yourself to dream a little bigger? Yeah, because all of a sudden you believe in new possibility. When you live in fear, you only live in current realities. You live in what you're capable of right now. But when you live in faith, you think about the future and what could be. And that is required for changing your life. The word possibility is my favorite word in the dictionary. Possibility. And the only way to create new possibilities is to live with faith that you're always being guided, realizing life is always happening for us and not to us. When you live that way, life changes so freaking fast. So I hope this served you today, guys. Hope this added value. Comment below with your biggest takeaway. I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day. We start our program in 2 freaking weeks. Less than 2 weeks. Stay tuned. Have an amazing holiday. Have an amazing time off. I absolutely love you guys. I will see you in the group next week.